Welcome back to the Death Valley Insider YouTube page. I'm your host, Kenny Van Doren. And before we start, you can always find us on social media at LSU Rivals and online at deathvalleyinsider.com or at Rivals at LSU Rivals, wherever you find us. Today, we're joined by John Garcia again. Welcome back, John. It's good to have you. We have a couple of things to kind of dive into, especially on the LSU front, around the SEC, just around the South in general, with the dead period starting here in 2 days, recording here on Saturday. But the first thing we want to start with is DJ Pickett, the name that was thrown around for LSU fans all week with an in-week, a midweek visit. Keelan Moses came and visited him on campus during his visit. Very big target for the Tigers, a big target that wasn't even included in DJ Pickett's top 5 last month. Where do you kind of see that standing for the Tigers?
Yeah, welcome to recruiting the state of Florida, right? You're never in it or out of it until the final whistle, as they say. And look, DJ Pickett is one of these truly elite players, drops the top 5 because he's been recruited for years at this point. But what that doesn't always account for is the coaching changes, the staff turnover at some of these schools. And you'll notice that Florida was one of the schools heavy on his list. He's a Tampa area guy. And naturally, Corey Raymond was spearheading that recruitment for the Florida Gators. And in some cases, Florida was viewed as one of the leaders for Pickett for some time. So naturally, when he goes back to LSU, back to DBU, that relationship doesn't just end in thin air. It's something that has clear carryover effect, and you see it resulting in a visit quite immediately after Raymond gets the job. And I thought what was interesting about the trip was not only, reuniting with Raymond and all of that, this was Pickett's first time in Baton Rouge. He's a very well-traveled kid. His family has been recruited for years. There's several brothers, cousins, family members that have made it to the highest level. So naturally, he's been able to take a lot of visits all the way out to Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, everywhere across the country. But for whatever reason, he hadn't tripped to Baton Rouge until Raymond went back home, as they say. So naturally, the visit gets set up. He takes it, and now all of a sudden, the top 5 feels a little bit different because LSU absolutely made an impression. You knew he was going to get the red carpet treatment, especially during a midweek visit, which I think was really critical for LSU in terms of just getting off on the right foot, if that makes sense. Prioritizing this recruit who has been prioritized by so many schools for so long. How could you present something different? Well, bring him in midweek, throw him a coach who he's extremely familiar with, and show him something new. And that's exactly what LSU was able to do. And now all indication is that the Tigers are going to stay in this race for quite some time.
And we've definitely seen Brian Kelly rebuild his defensive staff with guys that know Louisiana well, know recruiting well, and have just been well tenured. Bo Davis coming over from Texas has that reach in Louisiana, and he's rekindling a lot of relationships with guys in the Lone Star State that he was recruiting for the Longhorns. Kevin Peoples coming down from Missouri, Blake Baker, of course, both have Louisiana connections. Jake Olson, who's in his first time as a Power 5 coach, as a position coach for the safeties, also a guy who has reached into Louisiana. It seems like he's really building something that he can, spearhead into the top recruiting rankings. I know that's not his ultimate goal, but he's getting a lot of these top talents, and you kind of start there with DJ Pickett. That's where I want to kind of move now. Jabari Antoine joined the Tigers after during the Cajun Bash, committed there. He posted his top 8, top 9 on Christmas. At the time, it was a different defensive staff for the Tigers. Corey Raymond comes in, gets that connection built, and promises him, you're still going to have a future here. Tigers get him there. But a guy that's, not really on the Tigers' radar anymore. It seemed like the communication dwindled away, and that was Jaylen Bell, who was the first guy to commit to the class of 2025 for the Tigers. Where did that communication just go?
Yeah, well, there's a pro and a con when you start shifting so many responsibilities over, to the staff. And I think one of them is right fit and wrong fit, and I think for whatever reason, the communication between the newly assembled defensive staff and Bell certainly wasn't as consistent as Bell would have hoped for. As you mentioned, he committed way back in 2022 and was the longest tenured Tiger commitment, kid out of Grayson High School in the Atlanta area. But look, the communication fell off for whatever reason. So he thought it was best for him to take a step back and truly reopen the process. He was not slighting LSU in any way, but this is the contact period, right? So a lot of programs are visiting, a lot of offers are coming in, a lot of opportunities are coming in. So Bell just thought it was the right time to take a step back and reevaluate. And I think if LSU wants to increase that communication once again, I do think the Tigers could potentially jump back into the race because Bell tells us he's in no rush to make another verbal commitment. And look, when you were on board with one program for so long, obviously, you start buying gear, your family starts preparing for it, committed for more than a year is a very long time mentally to back off of it. So I do think that if the ball was in anyone's court, it's probably LSU's in this relationship. But I think it could also result in a parting of ways that benefits both parties. I think Bell's going to be plenty fine. He's got Clemson. He's got Georgia Tech visit this weekend. Georgia's been involved with him a little bit more. So I think his recruitment's going to be just fine. And obviously LSU has been red hot otherwise on the trail, specifically in the secondary. So I think this one could work out for both parties. And there's obviously a lot of time for all of it to be rectified one way or the other.
This was a question that popped up on our boards, looking at where Corey Raymond has been recruiting and the size of safeties, the size of cornerbacks. Does Jaylen Bell kind of fit the mold that he has been recruiting these last couple of years, especially when he was at Florida and then when he was at LSU previously?
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, Bell is going to be one of these gadget secondary players who can move around. He can play nickel, he can play outside, he could probably play some safety, but it's not because he's the biggest, longest recruit out there. I mean, 5'9", 5'10", 175 pounds or so, more of an instinctive player than a dramatic boundary type body like we see with a lot of these traditional LSU players. And look, I think, again, that goes into the fit, that goes into who you bring in and sort of what goes along with it thereafter. So definitely a situation where you understand sort of both sides of the equation, but certainly Bell has more, modern, versatile traits compared to the traditional Derek Stingley, 6'1", lengthy corner that's going to lock up one side of the field all by himself.
Kind of want to shift to the offensive side of the ball. There's a couple wide receivers in your area around the South. That's where, if people don't know, that's where John Garcia's eyes are. Cortez Mills, CJ Wiley, Caleb Cunningham. I'm missing another one right now as we're talking about it, but there's a lot of wide receivers out there that Cortez Hankton and Joe Sloan went to visit this week. Jamie French, who decommitted from Alabama after Nick Saban retired. A lot of guys over there. They're trying to build one of the top wide receiver classes. Already have DeCorian Moore, number 1 in the nation, who's on a visit to Oregon this weekend, looking at other options, just seeing what's there. What are you seeing from the Tigers on the offensive side of the ball?
Just aggression, and that's what you would expect. I mean, the wide receiver history at LSU recently is as good as any program in the country, including Bama, including Ohio State, some of the others that maybe are more well-known for it over a longer period of time, and that's something that resonates with recruits. And then obviously you throw in what happened last year on the field offensively and what we expect the NFL draft to look like, and you got to strike when the iron's hot. LSU is the hottest wide receiver program running today, I would say, over Ohio State, because you may have 2 first-rounders at the position here in the next couple of months with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. So I think that's all part of the plan here. Obviously, as you mentioned, DeCorian Moore is already on board, just a ferocious player out of the state of Texas, but you got to pair him. And LSU, again, has been known for pairing these elite wide receivers with one another over the last decade or so in some of these great pairings we've seen. So I think that's the pitch to Cortez Mills, to Jamie French, top 100, Caleb Cunningham, top 100 type of recruits. Hey, we've got one alpha, come be the second alpha, and let's be the next, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, or whatever duo you want to throw out there together at LSU. There's a lot to choose from, and that's something that resonates with recruits because they see it on Saturdays and certainly on Sundays. So it's an easier pitch for LSU, but on the Tiger side, they've got to stay aggressive in that pursuit because a lot of these kids look around and say, hey, DeCorian Moore is really good. Do I want to go and assimilate towards a program that's already got him locked in? It takes a special kind of kid to say yes to that challenge. Obviously, LSU's been able to accomplish that in the past, and they're looking for that next complementary receiver down south, and I think they'll probably grab one of them.
Before we get into this last question, I want to throw another wide receiver's name at you out of your area in the Texas region, a Houston suburb, if I'm not mistaken, but Corey Watson, who's another 4-star wide receiver in that mix. He talked about, he knows DeCorian's already there. maybe I can go join him. Caleb Cunningham said the same thing this week. They know he's there and they want to see if they can join him and be part of this top class. And that's where the last question goes. This morning on LSU Rivals, Jefferson Powell brought together a lot of the recruiting analysts and those on staff for Death Valley Insider for a fact or fiction. One of the big things Rivals does. And the fact or fiction for Saturday was, will LSU finish, or LSU will finish 2025 with the #1 overall class? And John Garcia, you said fiction. Why is that?
Just playing the field. It's like back in the day, maybe before your time, KVD, when we used to look at golf and it was like, hey, you pick Tiger or you pick the field. I'm playing the odds and picking the field only because there's just so many unknowns between now and the end of the cycle. Look, LSU hasn't had a #1 class in quite some time. They did finish top 5 2 cycles ago, but outside of the top 10 in the last cycle, which I do think prompted some of the changes under Brian Kelly. So I do think things are trending in the right direction. And LSU does have the ingredients early that we look for in a #1 class. Recruiting well in the home state. That's obvious. I think 6 members of the class are from Louisiana. I think they're all blue chips or better right now. 2, do you have your headlining quarterback recruit to galvanize peer-to-peer recruiting? Yes, of course. Bryce Underwood is on board. I do think you have that going for you from an LSU perspective. And then 3, momentum, perception. Do you have a positive mark in general when you go target recruits? And obviously that answer is yes, coming off of a Heisman Trophy season at LSU. So I do think all of the ingredients are there, but to execute that, it's a numbers game. It's just tight. I do think LSU will have a top 5 class. I do think LSU can challenge for the #1 class in the SEC. But again, we're going to expect Georgia there. We're going to expect Ohio State there. Texas looks like it's maybe here for good on that front. And then who knows what Alabama's going to be, right? Can they continue even closely to what we expect from that program from a recruiting perspective? So I don't think LSU is going to have a bad class. I certainly think it's possible. #1 is out there. I'm just playing the odds and saying, hey, it's probably going to be somebody else, but LSU is going to have a darn fine class, especially offensively once again, which is what we've come to expect. And we've talked about a lot of the main players that could make that happen. So I definitely think LSU could have its best class under Brian Kelly, which is probably the goal for most fans. And I think that if that's accomplished, you're talking about a top 3, top 4 group. And that's the type of ingredients, again, that could one day get you back to that national title game.
You talk about locking down the borders, keeping those top kids from Louisiana. One of the better states in the country for producing football players. Looking at it right now, after the commitment of Devin Harper this past week, they have the top 4 for the class of 2025 in the state of Louisiana. The #11 with Brett Bordelon, #12 with Teron Francis, and that's just with 9 commits so far. They were up to 10 with Jaylen Bell, but back down to 9 now. Well, John, that's going to do it for this episode on the Death Valley Insider YouTube page. As always, we thank you for coming on, and please let everyone know where they can find you on social media and at rivals.com.
Yeah, like you said, real simple, rivals.com. Social media is John Garcia _JR. A lot going on as we transition from 2024 to 2025, and we'll definitely be talking plenty of LSU along the way, so check it out.
Well, thanks again, John, and thanks again for those who are listening to us. You can always find us on social media at LSU Rivals. We'll see you next time.